Hey, Frog fans, we are back. This is the Frogs Insider Podcast presented by Flying T Club. Melissa Treebosser here, Jamie Plunkett here, checking in for a very irregular January schedule update. Melissa, it's been a second since we were back from the holiday break and recording regularly.
Yeah. Listen, we're recording regularly. It just might be a different definition of regularly is our football season regularly.
That's fair. That's fair. We will be better. We will be better because we're in the throes of basketball season. Football recruiting is heating up. As a former coach who has said other things recently, would like to say,
God.
baseball season's less than a month
Yeah.
away.
I can smell the grass.
we're
Pitchers and
getting-
catchers.
We're getting into it over here. So look for more from us. Hey, Melissa, that was an irregular intro for an irregularly timed podcast, but I do want to start by saying thank you to our sponsor, Flying T Club. Flying T Club is the NIL collective for TCU, and while there is a lot of change coming in the next 5 or 6 months when it comes to NIL and revenue sharing, it is still a very good time to make a contribution to the Flying T Club, and you can do that by going to flyingtclub.com and learning more about the organization. They support over 130 TCU student athletes. They're going to continue to try and support TCU athletes even with revenue sharing in place. A lot of schools are figuring out how to balance the two and what needs to happen with what, but NIL is still going to be a thing at TCU even after revenue sharing begins. And so it's important to get involved. Check out Flying T Club at flyingtclub.com. Your gift is a tax write-off because Flying T Club is a nonprofit organization and you get priority points. So it's just like going towards upgrading seat tickets, going towards all the things that you can get with priority points over at flyingtclub.com.
We might not know what things are going to look like in 6 months, but we know they're going to be expensive. So
Oh yeah, we've been hearing.
do your part, folks.
We have been hearing about the tickets over
Yeah.
at homefrogblitz.com,
Yeah.
and rightfully so.
I've been hearing about them in my inbox as well.
Yeah, I don't have that on our run sheet for tonight, but we can get into that a little bit maybe here in a second. Before we do that, though, also a big shout out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football's Republic of Football Network. We are a part of that network. You can find that podcast stream, which includes a show for every D1 football program in the state of Texas, wherever you get your podcasts, just by searching Republic of Football Network. We'll be in there along with shows for Tech, Baylor, SMU, Texas A&M, but also Rice and Sam Houston State and UTEP and UTSA and North Texas. Like it's a really cool organization, a really cool collection of podcasts, all in one feed right there for you. That feels overwhelming. You can obviously go just find Frogs Insider wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to the Frogs Insider YouTube channel. Check us out there. Hit the subscribe button. Watch all the post-game press conferences, all the pre-press conference stuff that we do over there as well, over at the Frogs Insider YouTube channel.
It's popping off.
It's doing well. It's thriving. It's healthy.
thriving,
It's
yeah.
vibrant. It's thriving. Tons of content daily. Just with all of the stuff that's going on.
We're having fun at the press conferences. More fun maybe at the women's press conferences than the men's. More cheers at the women's press conferences than the men's, but
I feel like the women's conferences are more opportunities for bits because everyone's in a good mood.
Yeah.
Whereas the last two men's press conferences, a little bit more gloom and doom.
yeah.
Frankly. We'll get into the hoops situation for both the men and the women here in a little bit, but Melissa, it's not on the agenda. I wanted to start. We can go ahead and start here though, because TCU has sent out season ticket renewals, and a lot of folks are saying all over social media, Horned Frog Blitz as well, talking about the price increase to season tickets this year, and I want to say first and foremost that I understand that is a pain point, and it can be a pain point for folks. I said this on the board the other day. If I was in a situation where I was buying season tickets for my family of four and they jumped by 30, 40, 50%, that would be a conversation that my wife and I would have to have about, is this still worth it? Is this still something that we can make happen? And so I understand from just the financial commitment, a lot of folks who are diehard, dyed in the cloth Purple Horn Frog fans with young kids are having to have hard conversations. Like that's a reality for a lot of people right now. At the same time, and this is my personal stance, I would rather have to have that conversation than the conversation about my school not even trying to stay competitive. Because the reality is the ticket increases are going to revenue sharing and to funding the athletics department budget in this new era of college athletics. And a lot of schools across the country right now are trying to find ways to keep up. And the schools that don't keep up won't keep up, right? And so I think for me at least, Melissa, I'm glad that TCU is backing up their commitment to spend to the revenue sharing cap. That obviously was going to come with some price increases. Dramatic price increases are not fun to swallow or easy to handle. But the reality is that it's a move TCU had to make if they wanted to live into the promise that they've made of being competitive at the highest level.
Yeah, I mean, I am a season ticket holder. I've kept my 2 season tickets despite being credentialed for the last several years, despite living out of state for several of those years. I've done it for a couple reasons. Number one, because I don't ever want to give them up and not be able to get them back. That is definitely the FOMO aspect of that. If there ever comes a time where I'm not doing this and I have to be a regular person in the stands, God forbid, I want to make sure I had tickets.
There's nothing wrong. First, there's nothing wrong with being a quote unquote regular person in the stands.
Listen, Jamie, and I will say this because most of my game time is spent on the sidelines, on the baselines, all of those things. No, there is. I can never go back. I can never go back. No, it's fine. I appreciate all the people in the stands. It makes the experience so much better. But once you've gotten to spend a game on the sidelines behind a camera, if that's what you love and what you're passionate about, it's a lot harder to go sit in the bleachers with the people. Also, don't really like people that much. But as crowded as a TCU sideline is, it's still better than a TCU bleacher. But no, that being just totally kidding, not really. But my tickets did go up. They did not go up dramatically as a lot of people's because I don't sit in the expensive seats where they know they can probably get more money out of people. That being said, I feel I empathize and sympathize in all aspects of this. I empathize with the TCU needs to stay competitive, and our tickets have been one of the better values in Power 4 sports for the last several years for football, among other sports. I empathize with the need to get more money in, and not to bring any specific points up, but everybody knows when something gets more expensive, it's the consumers that pay for it. You can say that money is going to fall wherever you would like it to fall, but we see that constantly here with the price of things. That money is going to go back to the people that want the service. Supply and demand is a thing. I also understand people that are saying, hey, we haven't exactly been delivered a product worthy of a 40 to 50% increase over the last several years. Also a completely fair point. I don't believe that you have to be I don't necessarily believe in the put your money where your mouth is, especially for families that have to make difficult financial choices. If you can no longer afford to make that decision and be a good decision for your family, and you can only afford to do 1 or 2 games a year, I totally get that as well. At the end of the day, like, nobody's wrong here. Everybody has a chance to make a decision. Every decision has a consequence. TCU can raise their tickets and less people can renew. TCU can raise their tickets and more people could think it's a big deal and want to be a part of it. People might be able to might make the decision to buy because new opportunities open up. People might make the decision to give their tickets up because they can't afford it. This is all part of sports, and I don't begrudge anybody for the choice that they have to make that's the right choice for them. I know everybody, and I see this on the board too, everybody says put your money where your mouth is, but that's not a realistic option for everybody. Do what you can to support the team when you can support it. If you can't go to the games, watch it on TV. You know, like, buy your TCU gear, give to NIL, like do what you can do to support the program when you believe in it and when you say that you're a fan. But at the end of the day, do what you can and what you're capable of fulfilling and what is asked of you. But you got to make the right choice for your family. So I totally understand TCU doing this. We'll see if it ends up being a good move this year, or if it's one of those things where they take a hit this year and then if they have a really successful season, more people want to join. We've seen this time and time with TCU athletics. We see it with basketball. 5,500 people showed up for the women's basketball game because it's a good product against a good product. But we've seen, attendance wane on the men's side sometimes too. So win and the people will come. If you don't win, it's more of a choice for people. And that's just the way that everything in life works.
It is, unless you're Jerry Jones.
Yeah, well, I listen, Jamie, I wasn't going to do this to you today. You and I are both suffering. Both of us, I would say, probably put our TCU fandom above most of our pro sports fandoms at this point.
Yes.
But what you're going through with the Cowboys and what I'm going through with the Kings,
it hurts, Melissa.
it hurts.
It doesn't feel good.
It hurts. It doesn't feel good. And then you're gonna punch us in the stomach by raising TCU prices too, man. Like it's tough, but this is being a sports fan. It's 94% pain, and the 6%'s worth it.
If I had known that Mike McCarthy was the good old days, I would have said less mean things about Mike McCarthy on the internet.
No, you wouldn't have, and that's okay.
Maybe.
That's okay. It's this is
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's January's tough. January's a tough month. I was talking to my dad earlier. We have not gotten into the Craig Treewasser lore ever on this podcast, and someday it needs to happen. But
we should just have Craig on the show.
Oh God, do we have a censorship? Like, do we have a rating on this thing? Because
I can put it explicit.
Yeah,
on
anybody
Spotify.
that knows me outside of this podcast knows I have a mouth on me, and I 100% got it from my father. But January it's a little bit of a doldrums in sports. TV is terrible this time of year. There's not a whole lot of options. It's cold.
I wouldn't say that. Skylar and I have caught up on Severance.
Yeah.
We've caught up on Silo. We've caught up on all the Apple TV product, basically.
Yeah. It's a catch-up month. Month. Yeah, I'll give you that. But
sure.
no, I'm with you on that. So
streaming television is in a good place right now, I will say.
Sure. But here's my complaint. Again, like, I love prestige TV. I was, after all, a radio, television, film major at Texas Christian University. But sometimes I don't want to think. I am thinking enough right now. And I love Severance, and I love Silo, and I love Shrinking. Why do they all start with S's? I
don't know, but I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. But sometimes I don't, like, I just finished Sonny. A lot of subtitles. Weird show. I don't know if I liked it. I honestly don't know how to think about it. I read a lot of reviews after to figure out what I just watched, but I had to pay attention. And I may not be a millennial, but I have millennial attention habits, and it was rough. It was rough.
Are we in the tree of trust right now?
Always.
You mentioned captions. My wife and I have started watching everything with captions. I love it. And I will also say this, like, we have old appliances in our house, so like the dishwasher's kind of loud or the washing machine's kind of loud, and so and also we're trying to keep the TV volume down so that we don't wake children.
Sure.
Closed
Giant
captioning
dog.
is a godsend.
Yeah,
the dogs are like on the couch with us snoring, so yeah, that adds to the noise as well. But closed captioning, the greatest thing.
Maybe our every other week podcast should just be you and I talking about TV and movies. I don't know.
Honestly,
I don't know.
Hey, by the way, that would be great. Also, if you feel the same way that I feel about closed captioning and you're watching on the YouTube channel right now, hover over the video. There's a little button. You can do closed captioning on our podcast as well. Yeah. And if you're on Spotify, I believe it will do the script version.
Apple does as well. Apple Podcasts
so you can
does
just
as well.
read our podcast, which would, in my mind, be crazy. To just try and read what we're saying, but here we are.
Because here we are 14 minutes into this thing, and we've barely even touched on
we talked about tickets.
Athletics. We talked about tickets.
Let's talk about why people would want to buy tickets for, I don't know, the 2026, 2027 football seasons, because TCU football recruiting is on a roll right now for this 2026 class. They've gotten 5 commitments in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. Really fun time for this 2026 class to be coming together. And Melissa, here are the positions of the players that have committed since January 18th. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Defensive line. Mm-hmm. Defensive end. Mm-hmm. Defensive end. Oof. Defensive line.
Yes.
Defensive line. Trench warfare is coming to the Carter in 2026.
The game is won in the trenches.
Including a player that you know well. Four-star Jesse Ford
Yeah.
out of Arlington Martin. 6'4", 235 pounds, four-star kid, rated as the number 121 overall prospect for the 2026 class. Picked TCU over a host of other offers. I mean, the guy had 15 offers, including Kansas State. He had Nebraska. He had the Arkansas offer. He had offers from Texas and Texas A&M. And he chose to stay close to home, and he wants to go to TCU.
Yeah, and to clarify, I don't know Jesse personally, but I know a lot of Jesse's friends and former teammates because they are students of mine. And I just want to say thank Jesse's mom, because I think Mama had a big say in him wanting to stay close to home. And so I love that. I was super excited. I was doing everything in my power to recruit him to TCU through his friends. It had zero impact whatsoever. But I am always doing my part. Where I do not, where I cannot give excessive amounts of money to TCU's NIL, I can still have do my part to participate in the recruitment of future Horned Frogs.
There you go. Just tell them how good of a time you had, right?
Yeah, like in 1944 when it was the campus was still in Waco.
During the war. TCU also adds Carter Buck, one of the best edge rushers for this class coming out of Lake Travis.
Great name.
Just a hell of a name for a defensive lineman. Amontre Harris committed earlier today. We are recording this on a Tuesday. Harris, former and soon-to-be future teammate of Chad Woodfork, defensive lineman for the 2025 class that signed and is currently on campus for TCU. So Amontre Harris, his teammate over at Summer Creek in Humble, Texas, is going to be a Horned Frog as well. A couple interior defensive linemen as well. Duncan McGee and Maddox Flint kind of round out that line that is committed in the last couple of weeks.
Two more great names, by the way.
6'2", 265, 6'4", 265 as high schoolers, so you know that they can add a little bit of beef probably there.
Give me a giant man named Duncan all day, every day.
And Duncan McGee out of Texas High, Texarkana.
Good.
So
good.
Same high school as Ryan Mallett, actually. Texas High
really?
Out of Texarkana. Fun fact. Arkansas great and Patriot player.
Was it QJ a Texas High kid too?
Quentin Johnson?
Yeah.
No, he was from Temple.
That's right. He's from Temple.
He played with Jared Wiley.
That's right.
Jared Wiley was his quarterback.
That is correct. Okay. I thought I just remember seeing the orange on his helmet, and I can't remember.
So TCU's got 7 commits already for the 2026 class. They're currently the number 28 overall class in the country. Not to mention, Brock Boyd, the first commit of the class out of South Lake Carroll, is seeing his product seeing his value skyrocket.
Ohio State.
Ohio State's in with an offer, a lot of offers for Brock, who said in his commitment to TCU that he wanted to stay close to home. Another kind of, I think Mama had a lot to say there, so I don't know how much those other offers are going to sway.
And once again, this is why your season tickets have gone up to keep guys like Brock Boyd, who are about to get Ohio State offers close. It's going to cost money, folks, to build these rosters. I've been really excited about not only what TCU did in 2025, but what their strategy seems to be going forward. You talk about the trench warfare. It is very obvious that Sonny Dykes, who says that he tries to build an entire football team out of every recruiting cycle, is very much trying to build this team from the inside out. And look, if we've had giant complaints the last 2 years, it has been, the run defense and the run offense, right? And so how do you fix those things? You recruit the heck out of the trenches, and not just bringing talented high star guys, but a lot of local kids from the area. And like you mentioned, just a ton of beef. And so will these guys all pan out? We have no idea, but does it look like they're doing things the right way? 100%.
Absolutely it does. And Sonny's recruitment isn't just limited to players either. I think that he has shown over the course of his career, not just at TCU, but prior to that he has a really good eye for coaching talent as well. And there was just a hire earlier this week to fill out the coaching staff a little bit more, because TCU loses Paul Gonzalez, the safeties coach who had been at TCU since 2011, to rival Baylor. He is the secondary coach and the defensive passing game coordinator down in Waco now. All the best of luck to Paul, a guy I've gotten to know really well, a guy I consider a friend. Very excited to see the next step in his career. Gonna miss him a ton in Fort Worth, because he's a genuinely awesome human being, and a little ticked that he went to Baylor.
Yeah.
But learning under Dave Aranda, I think, is a massive step for his career. So excited for Paul, which meant that TCU had to go and get another secondary coach. And Sonny dips into the well. Andy Avalos dips into the well and goes and gets a guy that Avalos coached with at Oregon. He was a GA for Avalos in 2019 at Oregon. That's Tre Watson. He's the safeties and nickels coach now at TCU. So he's going to be doing those interior corners and the safeties. And he's also the defensive passing game coordinator for TCU. He comes to TCU after 4 seasons as the DB's coach at Cal. And like I said, he worked with Avalos at Oregon in 2019. So this is a guy who's young. He was recently on the 30 under 30 assistant coaches list that 24/7 Sports does annually. He's high energy. You can go on socials and see a lot of clips of him at Cal practices, really kind of getting fired up, getting guys fired up. And he's a former cornerback who played at Washington, I believe. Played 2 seasons at the University of Washington. So
that Wilcox,
good pedigree there.
Yeah, that Wilcox defensive coaching tree is pretty solid too. I mean, nobody really thinks of Cal as being a powerhouse, but if you look at the way that team develops talent, I think that was a great hire for all of the reasons that you mentioned. That staff, and again, I mean, you and I both just have so much respect for Paul. He's a guy from my neck of the woods. We always had great conversations about back home. Who just cut his teeth at UC Davis and had a great path and has worked really hard. And I know, you and I both got to chat with him a bit. And he's strictly making a decision because I think he wants to continue to learn and grow. And it's hard. Nobody stays at a school as long, especially through multiple coaching regimes. That just doesn't happen very often. So I know people can be mad he's going to Baylor, and I get it, but I'm never going to wish anything but good upon him and his family. And so when you lose talented guys, that's what you want from a staff. If you have all your guys sticking around, it's generally because maybe they aren't as wanted elsewhere. And so that is a sign of growth and success for Sonny Dykes to have his guys go get promotions, get opportunities elsewhere. That being said, Malcolm Kelly, don't you ever leave us. But yeah, no, I'm excited, and I love the hires. When you look at every guy he's brought on, there seems to be a common trait, and that is high energy, hands-on.
Yeah.
These are coaches that are willing to get in the trenches and get in the mud, and really seem to not only be talented at coaching up and sharing information with their guys, but seem to want to be involved in their lives off the field too. And we talk about the style. You talk about Sonny's ability to recruit players and to recruit coaches. I think also his ability to recruit families, and I think that goes for the kids that he's recruiting and their parents and siblings, and also for the coaches and the type of atmosphere that he's building in that building, where you see a lot of kids running around, you see a lot of comfort level among the significant others, and that is, I think what separates TCU from some of these other places is that family atmosphere seems to often ring very authentic.
Yeah, I mean, you see that not just with Sonny and his staff, but I mean, talk about the baseball staff. I think is a really good example of that. Basketball staffs, and talk about just TCU administrators. And why did I say that word that way? TCU
that was
admin,
weird. Yeah.
I saw multiple folks that work in the athletics department who had their whole families at the women's game on Sunday, right? And it's just cool. It is you can tell that when people talk about TCU in that way, it is because there is an authenticity to it, like you said. And so that is pretty cool. And it's cool to see Sonny kind of cultivating that culture within the coaching staff at TCU as well.
Well, and we've seen it too, and I'm gonna awkwardly segue us into talking about the Senior Bowl through this, but you see this through the care that goes into these players, and by this point, if you don't know, about the tragic loss of Tiger Besh during that awful attack in New Orleans. On, I guess, what was technically New Year's Day. If you haven't seen the helmet sticker that every player at the Reese's Senior Bowl is wearing in honor of Tiger Besh, if you haven't heard about Sonny and so many players and coaching staff members traveling to be a part of his memorial service, it has, in what is an awful, terrible time for the Besh family, one thing that has remained consistent is how much support they said that they have received, not just from the TCU community, but the greater college football and fandom community and beyond. So, all of that being said and all of that, kind of being brought up, we get to talk about some fun things with Jack, and that's that he is absolutely kicking ass in Mobile, and for him to have been through what he's been through and to dealt with what he's dealt with, and I'm imagining there's got to be a sense of relief and hopefully pure joy stepping out on a football field and doing the thing that he knows he's good at, that he can control.
Yeah, it has to be, some mixed emotions there. I think, having journeyed with people in grief and in loss a lot, I've found that for most folks, routine really does help. Doing the normal things really does help.
Yeah.
And for Jack, going out and just being on the field, catching passes, running routes, all of that stuff is normal. And that sense of normalcy can almost bring you a sense of peace and relief in the midst of grief. And so I am glad that A, he's out there, B, that he was healthy enough to be out there after
Yeah.
the knee injury he had at the end of the regular season, and C, just hopeful that that normalcy this week gives him some opportunity to kind of recenter, reconfigure, and move forward in a better and a healthier place, and frankly improve his draft stock because he looked great out there day one. A couple clips of him going out and making some really good contested catches. I think kind of the general consensus for folks that are out there is that Jack Besh had a really good day.
Yeah.
So hopefully that improves his draft stock. I've seen him projected as high as third round at this point. And man, just what a cool opportunity for him, and just a great human being who represents TCU.
Well, and both of us have had so many opportunities to speak with him and to get to know him. Every time I'd see him pregame, no matter what he was doing, he'd always come up, give me a big hug, say hi, and just genuine, just joy for being a human. Like, that guy has it all. When he goes into interview with coaches and GMs, he's going to blow them away, not just because of his story, not just because of what he's endured, but just because of the person that he is. And to be able to put together physically what we've already seen from him mentally and with his maturity, I'm just so happy to see him performing well. I hope it continues. Hope he has an awesome game this weekend, and I do think he is going to continue to rise. On the flip side of that, Savion Williams also accepted a Senior Bowl invite, is not participating. Haven't heard anything. He did have some injuries. He was a little bit dinged up. I'm assuming, without any inside knowledge, that this is strictly because his draft stock is pretty secure. I think he's going to be one of the absolute combine freaks and one of the big names that comes out of that event, just based on what we know he's capable of physically. He probably doesn't need to play this week and risk further injury. He just needs to, have his name stay at the top of the buzz and show out at the combine.
Yeah, I saw a tweet that had a list of players who were kind of no-showing the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
And
Cam Scatterbo.
It looked like a lot of day two guys. Mm-hmm. So if you feel like your draft stock, or if you've gotten evaluations that kind of solidify where you're going, it does make sense not to risk getting out there and having something funky happen, especially, like you said, he's got the combine still to look forward to. He's got TCU Pro Day to look forward to. Just go test well at those places and maybe see yourself get a little bump from that. Totally understand Savion doing what he's doing. Don't really understand this next bit that we're going to talk about.
What a great segue.
That one just came natural, folks. This is what we do here at the Frogs Insider Podcast, presented by the Flying T Club. I will say it's been a minute since I'm going to back up, actually, for a second.
Oh, boy. The face rub. If you guys are just listening, that was a long face rub, Jamie.
And I want to be... I'm just going to say this. There are ways to uphold a legacy, and there are ways to not do that. And it feels like Gary Patterson is doing everything in his power to leave a funky kind of aura residue on the objectively great career that he had as TCU's head coach. I don't even have to say it, but TCU football isn't TCU football without Gary Patterson. Like, none of this is what it is if Gary isn't the head coach, and isn't the head coach for as long as he was. The fact that he turned down jobs, all the stuff, right? But then you go and you work for Texas. You go and you work for Baylor. All the while, you're still showing up to TCU home games. You're still shaking hands and kissing babies and doing kind of the legacy thing. And then he goes on Matt Mosley's radio show the other day and says he didn't build TCU. Quote, I didn't build it for it to fall. I'll end up at TCU, ... I'll end up dying in Fort Worth. And it's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too, man. You can't go and coach at Texas and Baylor and then just come and obviously there will always be a large circle of people who are Gary Patterson loyalists until the day they die, and there should be a large circle. I consider myself still a huge fan of Gary Patterson. I respect Gary Patterson. I think that he was always very good to me while he was here. It's just really interesting how he is handling his post TCU head coaching arc, and I put this on the run sheet because I really wanted to hear what you had to say about it, because I know you hadn't seen the tweet yet, and it's just so interesting to me that he's trying to have his cake and eat it too.
I mean, everything you said is 100% true, 100% in agreement. And then there's this part of me, though, that is not a fully evolved person, and probably never will be. And I'm oddly, I get it. So I've coached for a long time, never anything close to the level that Gary has coached.
Sure.
And when you leave a coaching position, whether of your own volition or someone else's, which has happened to me both ways, when you apply for a job and don't get it, when you expect things to end a certain way and they end a different way, I won't act like I haven't gone back and looked at Max Preps to see how that team is doing. And I haven't maybe occasionally taken a little bump of adrenaline and positivity if they aren't doing well, right? Yeah. We're all human. But I also never had anything close to the legacy that Gary had. And it's so funny to watch this happening with Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State in real time too. And a lot of the same names there on both sides. But I can't imagine doing something in a way that was better than pretty much anyone had ever done it at a place, to the point to where I had a statue on the walkway leading up to it, and then it ending in a way that wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
And not even like at the end of the season, like a negotiated, everybody knows that you were going to get fired, but we're going to let you walk away on your own, because it couldn't even end like that, because that's Gary. Right. That's got to be really, really hard. And we all want to be good people. Well, most of us want to be good people, and we all want to not say that we're happy when something struggles. But we both know that 2022 had to absolutely kill Gary, and 2023 probably made him happy, right? Like, I mean, like that's just, and that's the way coaches are wired, especially at that level. You have to be a little bit of a psychopath in that regard to be successful at that level. So I'm not even going to say it's disappointing, because it's not at all surprising to me. I don't even know that I find it funny. It's exactly what I would have expected to hear. And there is absolutely a part of me that hopes that there comes a time where there is a healthy role for Gary Patterson, shaking hands and kissing babies. But I also know
that would be great.
Right?
But it would be great.
Is it possible?
I don't know.
Now, new athletic director.
Sure.
New chancellor.
Sure.
Poland and Gary didn't really cross over. I mean, there's new, and I do think that at some point, now will it happen while Sonny Dykes is still the head coach? I don't know if I see that.
No. And it shouldn't, right? Like, and there's, ministry and coaching are wildly different, but I think one of the things that is relatively similar about them is that when you leave a church, there has to be a grace period of time where you don't go back, because the next person needs space to do ministry their way, to build relationships that matter, to implement what they need to implement. And if the former person is always just kind of lingering and hanging around and still talking to people and still having those relationships, it just makes it so much harder for the new person to get established in a way that can be meaningful. And I obviously, ministry and football are two very different things, but I think there's some similarity. There's some there's some crossover there, right? Like, imagine trying to be in charge of a D1 football program while the last guy is still kind of hanging around. Like, it's there's got to be a sense of unease there, especially when you consider, you know, just the relationship of Gary and Sonny, right? Like Gary threw Sonny a lifeline, and Sonny took it and leveraged that into the SMU job, and then all of a sudden was replacing Gary at TCU. And it's just, there's so much there that I think space is good. And I don't know that space has always been had in this situation. At the end of the day, if Gary ended up at TCU again in some capacity, I think that would genuinely be good for the university. I think if he continues to kind of needle and do some of the things that he's doing, it's going to make that hopeful hope. It's going to make his hope for that future, you know, less and less and less.
When you build something like I can compare it to starting like my flag football program, you know, a year and a half ago, right? When you build something, you don't want it to fail when you leave. Mm-hmm. You want to see it continue to grow. Yeah. But I think it's also it would be, if they don't go to the national championship in 2022, just a year and a half after, maybe it's a little bit easier, because you always want there to be success at the thing that you built. But I can imagine it would be really hard when that success is so, when Sonny so quickly got to the point that Gary was so close to having the chance to get to, but never got the opportunity. Like, yeah. I'm sure that's hard, but you're right. Like, at some point, and I say this with all of the love in my heart, Gary, like, stop talking.
That ain't gonna happen.
But like, that's the thing, right? I saw him before the UCF game. He was the same thing. He's always good to me. You know, I did get some angry DMs, but who hasn't?
Sure, it's part of the
gig. Really. But I want it to make sense for him to come back. I do think he belongs to Fort Worth. I do think he's so intertwined in this community. I do think there are a lot of people that still have a lot of love for him, but the next generation doesn't understand history because it's still so fresh. Like, give people a chance to appreciate you with a little, like you said, grace and space and opportunity. I think Sonny's well established at this point. I don't think he would be particularly intimidated, but I also don't think it's the right time. Yeah. I also just frankly cannot see Gary Patterson being back involved with TCU football with the Bryles on the staff. I just don't see how that works. Like, that could just be a very, very awkward situation. It would be quite funny. Not that they haven't both existed.
You know what's not quite funny?
Are you going to get us out of this topic?
Funny? We're segueing right now. We're going to pivot so hard. It's incredible. You know what's not funny? The fact that TCU had a 35-year losing streak to Baylor in women's basketball. You know what is funny? It's way over. After Sunday, TCU women beat Baylor 80-75. They get that huge monkey off their back, a 37-game losing streak going back to 1990.
And they before even Baylor. I was in school. That's how old it is.
Gosh, yeah. You were already in your 40s, though, because I know you're a second career college student. Anyways, TCU beats Baylor, second largest crowd ever in Schulmeyer history for a women's basketball game, with over 5,400 fans in attendance, eliciting, by the way, what I thought was a really good quote from a question you asked Nikki Colleen, the Baylor head coach, afterwards, where she gave TCU's fans props for showing up, saying that TCU deserved this and that the TCU women's basketball team deserves the support of Fort Worth. Pretty cool comment from a head coach who is not used to losing. And not used to losing in that building.
Never lost in that building.
Has never lost in that building.
She is cool. I like her a lot better than Kim Bulkey. I'll just say that.
Well, that's not hard. That's a low bar.
Yeah. That was, and again, I've talked about this multiple times, but as somebody who grew up playing basketball, who's coached women's basketball, who was the lone person for a lot of times, it felt like, in that entire arena covering TCU women's basketball back in the Lauren Hurd era, Sunday was cool. And like, there have been multiple like super, super cool things this season. I mean, every time they step foot on the floor, they're making some level of history. But Sunday was really, really special because it was Baylor, because it was that TCU Baylor rivalry being ignited around women's basketball. because it was such an entertaining game that didn't need to be that entertaining. We absolutely need to talk about the late game situations for this team. But to see 5,500 people almost, which you mentioned is the largest crowd ever, was also for a TCU Baylor game. That was when Baylor was ranked number 2, and Brittany Griner was their superstar, she just made a big free agent move today. But it was like, again, I got a little teary-eyed. I got a little emotional. I try not to do that when I'm covering a team, but I also can't help it. And I ran into Donovan Hunter and Aaliyah Robertson as I was walking back to the media room after the alma mater, and like I just kind of turned around and I just was like, I don't know if you guys understand what this means to those of us that have followed this program for a long time. Not just because it had been so long, but because like these milestones keep adding up. I was just like, thank you. Like you guys have given me so many great moments, but thank you for this one because of the crowd, because of the rivalry, because again, this is a top 10 program. There have been so many of those moments, and it's really cool we've both gotten to spend so much time around the program and covering this team and in so many press conferences. They deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. They deserve this community's support. And they're not done yet. There are 9 games left. The next 2 might be the 2 toughest they're going to play for the majority of the rest of the season, at Iowa State, at Kansas State. Kansas State just lost Ayoka Lee, possibly for the duration of the regular season, though they think she might come back early. But this is a chance for this team to really assert themselves as the Big 12's best. They got some things to clean up, but Sunday was cool and fun and a sign of just how far this program can go.
Let's talk about some of the things that they can clean up, because there's been a trend at the end of games recently for TCU where they build these really big leads. They're up at halftime. Sometimes they're up in the third quarter by as many as 20, or like on Sunday, 22 points. And then other teams just kind of chip away and chip away and chip away. And then all of a sudden it's a game late. We saw this really for the first time against UCF, where the Knights were down by about 18. And then all of a sudden it was a 7-point game. It happened against Oklahoma State. It happened against Kansas at Kansas. The Oklahoma State one is the only one where it's actually bitten them in the butt, because they ended up losing that game, and they still had a look to win it at the very end. And then again on Sunday, up by 22 with a minute and a half left in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden it's a 3-point game with 30 seconds left in the fourth, and you're wondering if another collapse is on the horizon. Is this, in your estimation, just the short rotation, just playing seven girls the whole time? Is there something about, the fact that it's happened a few times now? It's like, oh, here we go again. Like, what's your evaluation of this team late game? Is it player led? Is there something Mark Campbell should be doing? I'm really curious your opinion on this.
I have I think 3 thoughts on this. And again, I'm not going to claim to know better than Mark Campbell. This is just my opinion. Take it or leave it. I'm irrelevant, right? But there's 3 things that are happening. Number 1, absolutely the short rotation is a big part of that. When you're primarily only playing 7 players, and these, as has been stated ad nauseum at this point, this is the oldest team in college women's basketball. They are over 22 years old. Most of these women have a lot of tread off the tires. They've played a lot of minutes in their career. And so I think that absolutely has something to do with it. Number 2, I think that Mark Campbell is still learning how to coach in these scenarios, in these situations. We saw him at Oklahoma State as momentum kind of swung and TCU's lead started to shrink. He didn't call a timeout, and some coaches believe, especially with the veteran team, let your team play through it. That's a completely reasonable thing to do, and I don't necessarily fault him for that. But I do think that there were 1 or 2 opportunities at least where he could have taken a timeout, kind of gathered his team, allowed them to catch their breath physically and also to catch their breath emotionally. Because as you mentioned, they've seen these leads start to shrink a little bit a couple of times now, and I'm sure there is some mental aspect to that. And number 3, and I think this is the thing where there's the biggest opportunity to make a tactical change that could be effective. I meant to look this up, and I don't have the exact stats, but I want to say over the course of about the last 4 minutes, I don't think Sedona Prince really touched the ball in a scoring opportunity or pick and roll opportunity at all on offense for the Horned Frogs. And as effective as she has been, I would really like to see her get a little bit more opportunities to impact that game late stage. Haley Van Lith is your closer. I have 0 problem with that, and she should be your closer. She's absolutely earned that right. But I also think that there's opportunity for her. Like, I feel like on those late game possessions, both at Oklahoma State and again down the stretch at Baylor, she is being asked to do a lot of stuff one-on-one. And when everybody knows the ball is going to her, I think that she's not getting the best looks possible. She got a pretty decent look in Stillwater. I kind of said something to you down towards the end of the game, like Haley's got to give that up and get it back or something. You're like, well, she got a layup opportunity. She absolutely did. But I think what's happening is she's expending so much energy creating that opportunity because she is, having to pound the ball for 10 or 12 seconds to create an opening that by the time she gets to actually finishing, she's not getting the best, freshest legs that she can. So I'd really like to see them involve Sedona a little bit more down the stretch. I'd really like to see them kind of use Madison even more as a decoy. I mean, she shot the ball so well against Baylor. She was making plays off the dribble and in the pick and roll. Even if you're saying, hey, Haley is our closer, which again, she has earned that right. I have no problem with that, but I think that too often that she's being asked to make a play one-on-one when everybody knows what she's trying to do. And that's not necessarily the best way to get, even if you want to get her a look, to get her the best possible look. So short rotation, absolutely. I think Mark Campbell tactically can use his timeouts a little bit better. He did a much better job on Sunday using those. I think he learned from Wednesday when he didn't use them. And then I'd like to see a little bit more creativity. I saw this in the sideline out of bounds too. Did not see enough action. I think that Campbell trusts his players to get open to make a play. And again, they're experienced, veteran, talented players, but those are the situations where I would like to see him have a little something in his bag that he can pull out just to give, because even if your players are good, sometimes if you have something special for them in that situations, it gives them a boost of confidence. Even if you draw something up, just to make it look like, hey, I'm putting you guys in an advantageous situation, not just counting on you to be great in this moment. It does take a little bit of the pressure off. So to answer your question, the TLDR, yes, short rotation is a problem. Yes, I do think there's some coaching things that can be adjusted, and he's learning. He hasn't had a lot of these high pressure games at this level, so that's completely reasonable. And I think just a little bit more creativity and team ball in those final shot clock possessions would take some of the pressure off of Haley and enable this team to do what it's do best, and that is keep defenses guessing.
Yeah, and I agree. I definitely agree with getting Sedona involved more. She did not, frankly, against Baylor, have a ton of back to the basket looks just throughout the entire game. And we've heard her and Campbell both talk recently about, doing what's working, like making them stop the easy stuff. And for Sedona, like, do I love watching her pull up from the elbow and drop nail a jump shot? Yeah, I mean, it's part of her versatility. It's part of what makes her impossible to guard beyond just the fact that she's 6'7". But sometimes you've just got to be like, I'm 6'7". And I'm going to be down on this low block, and I'm going to call for the ball, and you're going to have to stop me. And just hit repeat on that. Just spam it over and over and over again until they prove that they can stop you or somebody fouls out, right? And I think that's a great way, like you mentioned, to mitigate how tired the guards are at the end of games, especially HVL, because she was gassed, and she's been gassed. And frankly, she looked a little gassed in the second quarter of the Baylor game because a couple shots fell short. So
we saw him get KG some early minutes, but then she didn't play. I don't think at all the second half, and that's those things like it's hard. I know you don't want to take her off the floor. I know she doesn't want to come off the floor, but this girl has been going nonstop since the summer. Mm-hmm. I mean, she played deep into March or April a season ago. Then she started training for 3-on-3, which is incredibly taxing on your body physically. We're now getting into February. That is a long season for Haley Van Lith. We saw Caitlin Clark kind of go through the same thing, and I'm fairly certain that's why Caitlin Clark isn't playing an Unrivaled. Like, I think your body needs a break from repetitive motion. And so, I totally understand that these are tough games and you want to keep your best players on the floor, but I would love to see them. They almost always come out with the big third quarter. If he could buy his stars a couple of minutes, even in the second quarter or late in the first going into the second, I have utter confidence in this team. There's not a lead that really concerns me. Like, you could almost afford to give an 8-point swing in the second quarter if you've got your fresh legs for the third and fourth.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, even when you're up 22 in the third with a minute and a half left, just sit some people,
Yeah.
right? Get KG and Una in there then.
Yeah.
And even if you go into the fourth quarter with a 14-point lead, like you've gotten a couple extra minutes of rest for the folks that are going to have to close out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I agree. And I think obviously Campbell's still learning on the job as well. But, hey, hell of a record to just be learning on the job
Right.
at 20-2, 8-1 in Big 12 play. 2 huge games coming up this week. They travel to Ames to play Iowa State on Sunday afternoon before a midweek matchup with Kansas State, who they are currently tied atop the Big 12 standings with, both 8-1. That one will be a huge factor in deciding.
No return trip. So this is the
no
big
return
one.
trip. This is the only one, so you got to go get it if you want to be regular season Big 12 champs. So,
If you want that top 16 seed, these 2 games are going to be massive towards the net.
Massive. You know what wasn't massive,
Yeah.
Melissa? That's TCU men's 3-point shooting against UCF. So, just 1 for 20.
Anything.
Lowest.
Except for the free throws. Free throws were good.
It matters a lot when you lose by 27. Look, men's basketball. We've talked about this before. This is a year where you learn what you've got as far as youth is concerned. Sometimes young players, this happens, right?
Yeah.
Just you're gonna have games like this. You're gonna have these kinds of bumps in the road. 85-58 loss at UCF in Orlando. Tough game. Whatever. Wash it. Move on. 1 for 20 from 3-point range. Lowest 3-point shooting output for a TCU team since 2015. Prior to Jamie Dixon being there when they went 0 for 9 against Oklahoma State. So not even close to the volume of missed shots, but 5% was their shooting percentage from 3-point range on Saturday. And yeah, they fall to 10-9 on the season, 3-5 in Big 12 play. Things don't get easier with a game against Texas Tech this week. It's currently sitting at a number 11 in the RPI, or excuse me, number 11 in the KenPom. And yeah, it's just it is what it is, really, at this point with men's basketball. The talent is there. We've seen glimpses of what it looks like when it's going really, really well. I think the goal is to continue to see how you can develop David Punch and Michael Robinson, how you can get Uday maybe a little bit more of an offensive game around the rim, and then you just reset. You reset for next year. Hopefully, obviously Frankie Collins is taking the red shirt, and keep him around next year. And you've got a veteran guard again to lead some of these guys who have more game experience. You've got one of the best freshmen in the country coming in next year, and Bug Edwards, and you just kind of take the season for what it is. You take your lumps, and you get to 2026.
Yeah, I mean, the whiplash this fan base has after winning at Waco, which at this point is just like, yeah, that's just what we do. And then coming back, you have a 14-point lead against Kansas, and then the next 3 halves of basketball are about as painful as 3 halves of basketball you could have. I think we started to see a little bit of hope after that Baylor win, because that is a good Baylor team. But, we've said it from the beginning of the season. This was a team who was probably making a goal of making a run in the NIT. That still remains, although it won't be easy to get a position in that postseason tournament when you, like you said, look at the upcoming schedule. I am happy to see Jamie Dixon playing his young guys more. We've seen Jace Posey get some minutes. We've seen Micah Robinson. His role continues to get more consistent. And David Punch, obviously, has earned his way to being a big-time contributor. We're seeing Malik Diallo get some run. That's what you have to do. That's what you have to do. You have to play those guys. You have to show them that they have a role in this program. You have to decide who you're going to prioritize keeping on this roster, and you have to prove to them that you can build around them. And that's going to be the challenge. Now, I can't imagine it will be nearly as difficult as what it was this past offseason. I would think that you're not going to be replacing quite so much, hopefully, but in this era, who knows? But I think we've seen Jamie try to adjust his style around the team that he has, but his team still can't consistently execute the things offensively that they need to do to win. You're not going to win a game going 1 for 20 from 3. period. And yeah, maybe some of that is the offensive system, and some of that is you just got to make shots. And to their credit, that's what the players said post game. Is like, at the end of the day, like sometimes you just like you don't make shots, you're not going to win. So it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be a frustrating end run of this season. You hope they can play spoiler a couple of more times, and you hope that you can see some positive signs of development for the future. And you get Frankie Collins back, you bring back this core, you add Bug Edwards, and all of a sudden there's reason to be excited for a year from now.
Yeah, and not to mention we've gotten this far into talking about men's basketball, and we haven't mentioned Vashawn Alette, who is only a sophomore.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, the turnover issues are there. The over dribbling, some of the decision making is there. I think, one of the things that stood out to me after the Baylor game was in post game, we were talking to Brendan Wenzel and Ernest Uday, and unprompted, Ernest mentions that Vashawn Alette was talking to Jace Posey after the game, who had a really good second half in that win. And was just like, hey man, way to make the most of your minutes, right? Like, trying to maybe step into a little bit more of a leadership role. We saw the little post-game video thing that TCU men's basketball put out, where he's hollering in the huddle in the last 4 minutes of the game, "Stay together, stay together." I think we've seen Alette kind of thrust into a leadership role and a ball handling role that he maybe wasn't fully expecting this year with Frankie coming in. But now that Frankie's out for the season, he's kind of had to step up and be that guy. I think I'm not necessarily making a player comparison here. I remember how much Damian Baugh turned the ball over right after he transferred from Memphis, because he was a 3-and-D guy who was supposed to stand in the corner and shoot and play really good defense when he was with the Tigers. And then he came to TCU, and it was the most he'd ever touched the basketball.
Yeah.
Right, and he was averaging like 5.5 turnovers a game, but he looked pretty good offensively, and he was a good distributor. I see a lot of similarity in Vashawn with the turnovers, the decision-making, not always there, but when he hits that skip pass, it's in the pocket, and the guy has a really good look. When he can get to the rim, he's very capable of scoring in a variety of ways. So I think that there's some opportunity there for growth that I think could go a long way to making Vashawn a fan favorite for future years. But we're just watching a young guy and a young team really try to sort things out and figure it out as they go right now.
He's got a lot of playground to his game, right? Like in the best
Yeah.
possible way. He's the dude that shows up at the Y and you're like, I want that guy on my team. Like, even though he's going to chuck it up 35 times and might only make 8 of them, because he's going to keep shooting. Like, this kid does not have a confidence issue whatsoever. Mm-hmm. He just has a learning to play, like you said, with the ball in his hands issue. And I've been really impressed with him. I think at one point towards the beginning of the season, I looked over at you and I was like, I don't think this kid's going to last under Jamie Dixon this whole season, because the body language was bad. There were some maturity issues. There were some authority issues. He did not want to get coached up. And I would say that is the complete opposite now. I think Jamie Dixon is the right kind of coach for a young player like Vashawn Alette, who has so much talent, but does need to be reined in without having his confidence killed. And Dixon, I think, has done a really good job, and his support staff has done a really good job of managing Vashawn and putting him in a position to be successful. We are going to live with a lot of those mistakes that you mentioned for all of the reasons that you mentioned, but that might pay off. And we're seeing Damian Baugh, that's a great comp, by the way, because look at what he's doing in the G League now.
Yeah.
Like, he's getting better and better. Yeah, he's like one of the leading assist players in the league. And maybe Vashawn won't be that, but maybe he can be. He probably also won't have to be if a healthy Frankie Collins is back. You put him with the scoring punch of a Vashawn Alette next year, and hopefully a continued development of Uday, who I don't know that he's ever going to have an excellent back to the basket thing, but David Punch is showing that he can, and those two together with a rim runner and a rim protector and a Punch who can play with a little bit more skill, you might have something that's really, really hard to play against next year, and a lot of reason for optimism for the future. So again, I know people are frustrated. I know they're frustrated that, my God, every time I look at the board on Horned Frog Blitz, there are 742 threads about JB Dixon. And it's all the boomers who think we'll never be good again, against all the young guys who don't understand the pain of the past. And it's just so, like, the circle jerking going on there, man. It's hilarious. It makes me, I know, but it makes me laugh. I love it. But I'm just like, I can't jump in I don't know how you do the game threads. It's rough, but I get it. Like, again, I get both sides of it. We want to be a good basketball school. Like, it might not be TCU's priority ever, but it's probably not any easier for Jamie Dixon when Mark Campbell can come and turn things around so quickly, even though very different sports, very, very different sports.
Yeah, context is important, I think, in both of those situations. But the reality is, and I think it's fair to say this now, I think it's okay to say this now, women's basketball didn't have any NIL last season.
Yeah.
And Mark Campbell brought in the transfers that he did and put together the roster that he did. And obviously the situation's changed now for this year from an NIL perspective. But very different contexts. Yeah. Very different contexts.
And he'll admit he got lucky. Like, people knew Madison Connor could shoot. I don't think anybody anticipated the girl at the end of the bench at Arizona playing like 5.5 minutes a game and shooting like 1.2 threes a game was going to be the best shooter in college basketball, arguably.
Mm-hmm. You just trust your evals, right? Yeah. And trust your evals. And frankly,
and you get lucky.
I think that's one of the best parts of Jamie Dixon and his staff's ability is to eval kids, right? Like, retention maybe is a challenge at times. Look at PJ Haggerty at Memphis, what he's doing right now for a top 25 team, right? He's averaging like 21 points a game, playing really, really well. It just happens, right? Yeah. Basketball is one of the most unique sports in college because of your ability to have success one year and failure the next.
Yeah.
It all hinges on so few players, and so I know that TCU fans, especially some fans on the board, aren't fully satisfied with what's happened the last few years, and I get it, right?
Yeah.
And I also understand the other side of folks who remember how low the floor was at one point. Yeah. And I think that the consensus that I've seen on the board and everywhere else is that the floor has been raised dramatically under Jamie Dixon. The question that remains is, how high is the ceiling?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a fair question to ask. I think that Jamie Dixon should be afforded the opportunity to fully answer that question. And I think that next season is going to be a really good opportunity for him to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, much like our Gary Patterson conversation, the floor is only raised because of what Jamie Dixon did for this program.
100%.
And so I have no problem with people wanting to see what the ceiling can be and being disappointed that we haven't gotten there, but also 3 straight tournament years. We said from the moment the Utah State game ended, man, next year's going to be a rebuilding year. Like, there was no question. And then when you lose some of the players that you lost, and yeah, it's frustrating to see guys being successful in other systems and other programs, but you trust the evals, you find the talent. Sometimes you can't put square pegs in round holes, and you don't find out those, that they're squares until you get them there. Like, it's just it's the way basketball works. And he's had a system that's worked for him for a really long time. To his credit, he's made a lot of adjustments, but that doesn't mean that everybody's going to work out, that he recruits to TCU and stay there for 3 or 4 years. It's just not. It's not the nature of the game.
It isn't. Melissa, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Frogs Insider. We can hop into some baseball things next week as that.
Oh, we didn't even get to baseball, man.
Don't worry. I was out there this past weekend. I'll be out there again next weekend taking in some of the inter squads. Those are completely open to the public, by the way, for anybody listening who wants to get out and watch some Frog Ball USA take place next year. Really impressive freshman class. Really impressive slate of pitching. This is, in my estimation, one of the deeper teams TCU has fielded in a few years. So I think it's a talented bunch that has a lot of potential. So hop on board, Frog fans.
Looking forward to it.
But until then, she's Melissa Treebwasser. I am Jamie Plunkett, and we will talk to you next time. Go
Frogs.